it's absolutely rigid. Taking a score for a moment to go.
Well, we've been involved in the project for a long time, since the early stage of the master plan, all the way through to implementation. In fact, we were working right up to a week before the games actually started. Arup has a big involvement in the project, not just from landscape and landscape engineering, but from a wide range of engineering services through a framework contract. So they're one of the three major framework contractors on the project. So the firm has had an involvement right from the early days when the first enabling works were carried out. So this is things like removing 53 pylons and undergrounding all those services, and also involved in the cleanup of the waterways and work like that. Okay, yeah, landscape engineering position's an interesting one. Basically, I'm a landscape architect, but I'm leading an engineering team. So I have on this project I had a team of civil engineers, structural, surface water drainage, lighting, etc. And the idea was that we take the design intent from LDA Design and Hargreaves Associates, and then we pull together the detailed design, take the scheme through planning, through construction and implementation. So very long involvement with the project right from the master plan. So understanding the master plan and taking that all the way through to implementation. The idea of a landscape architect leading an engineering team is perhaps unusual to some people, but it's actually extremely effective because a landscape architect can understand the design intent and then can relay that to the engineers. So it's not just engineers designing it, and a landscape architect can make sure that the subtleties of the design are carried all the way through the process, and that's extremely important. And I think a landscape architect's a good discipline to do this, because they have I think a lot of landscape architects, hopefully most landscape architects, are always thinking about the end product, whereas an engineer may be thinking about a bridge design and therefore concentrating on one small aspect of the overall project. A landscape architect will always be thinking about the end product, the surfacing, the way it links to the surrounding area, the way that the different surfaces and levels may work, lighting, steps, levels, tiny details, and the way the whole thing will fit together in the end. I think it's an ideal profession to actually carry out that role. We got involved right from the start, really. When I first got the infrastructure project, as I explained, Arup as a firm are involved in a huge variety of the engineering aspects of the project, so we were involved right at the start. John Hopkins, the ODA sponsor, wanted a landscape-led engineering team to make sure that the quality of the design could be kept all the way through from design intent through to implementation, and therefore we were involved at the start. And I remember very early on going around the site on a trip, and amazed really at the condition of the site, the polluted rivers and the neglect and general sort of dilapidated nature of the site, and thinking we've got 5 years to turn this into something special. But as you can see from the results, I think as everybody can see from the results, we've managed to, as a team, I think as a really collaborative effort. I think that's one of the important things about the project, is that it really is a collaboration between consultants, a lot of different consultants, a lot of different landscape architects, between the clients and the contractor and the consultants to actually create a fantastic job, really. And I think without that collaboration it would never have been successful as it is. And it's actually quite interesting to hear, as the Games has opened now, a lot of reaction from people, really. I keep hearing that the best thing about the park is the landscape, which is, I think, a testament to the success of how this project's been arranged, really. Yeah, the form of contract we used was the NEC form, and I thought it worked extremely well. That contract's been designed to try and reduce conflict, and given the timescale of the project, I think that was important. So you could always anticipate things that may happen, and you can cover these with requests for information and through the early warning process. I think that was an extremely effective way of actually doing the work, especially on a very fast-moving project, because you can sort of see ahead what may happen, and where you can see a conflict arise or something that needs to be resolved arise, you can quickly early warn the contractor and the client about it and overcome it through discussion rather than leave it to a conflict situation. I think the form of contract worked extremely well. I'm actually used to using it because working in Arup as a landscape architect, we tend to use that contract a lot on other projects as well. So it's a very good one, really. Yes, I think our role really was to understand the design. That was the main task at the start, and we worked with the then master planners, ACOM, on that. And then when LDA Design Hargreaves Associates came in, we again worked very closely with them to sort of understand the design and the way that we wanted the design to work, and the way that the whole part worked, so that then when we came to actually detail design it, we were then the design team leaders that led the detailed design and the taking the scheme through planning and implementation, that we understood the basis of the whole design so that we could really make it work. So at each design stage, I think it was a case of making sure that we went back to those design principles, and also working with the ODA's priority themes was a very important part of the project. There are 7 priority themes, which sustainability, accessibility, and all of those sorts of things. We had to really make sure that the scheme worked with that, and I'm pleased to say that it really has done that. Yes, when we first arrived, I remember the first site visit I went on, really the site was completely derelict. There were pylons, there was green stuff growing in the water, there was overgrown embankments, a lot of junkyards and tyres everywhere and stuff in the water, and it was quite daunting in a way to think we've got to make this into a fantastic park, and you know, that's really fit for the world to see. I was thinking about the project in the end that, you know, this is going to be a park that's viewed from all over the world. So, you know, the importance of making sure that transformation is made obviously is extremely important. Yes, when we first got to the site, the other thing that struck me were the levels as well, and I think it's an extremely interesting site in terms of the way that the levels work and the way that the rivers are arranged, and I think it's always been intended that the park is based so that you can see the water, and that the water is an important part of the whole overall feeling of the park, and there are always going to be difficult level changes. That was one of the first things that struck me. You know, it's going to be really important to get the levels right, and of course we've got to make that work with accessibility. So again, thinking about how the whole thing can work was important. Yeah, in terms of the soil that was on site, the site's been used for many years during the Industrial Revolution onwards, and contained all sorts of different industries. So the soil had all sorts of different materials in it, not necessarily very pleasant. And it was Atkins, I think, were involved in the soil washing processes. But as far as I know, something like 1,000. Let me just check that figure. Yeah. Something like 1.3 million tonnes of material was soil washed and then replaced back onto the site. So this was a huge, great operation with soil washing machines. But you know, a really sustainable way of using your materials on site. So, you know, rather than taking all that material off and then importing something like 1.3 million tonnes of material, we actually we're able to, as a project, we were able to reuse that material on site, which is a very sustainable way of working. I think what made this work was that I had a fantastic team of engineers, and engineers are brilliant because they always give you fantastic technical advice about things. So then as a landscape architect you could work out the best thing to do in terms of resolving a problem situation, or resolving the best way to actually go forward with a part of the design, or how to best to resolve things. And I think the way it worked was really, I think you had a landscape architect who understood the design and could sort of take the project forward on that basis, but a very well informed landscape architect that could then decide on the best decision to, you know, obviously discuss with others as well. I think there's also good collaboration between ourselves as the South Park landscape engineers with Alison Braham and her team on the North Park, Atkins. She was acting as the landscape engineer on that team. So we coordinated together and we shared details and made sure that the design in the end appears the same both in the North Park and the South Park. So there isn't a great deal of difference there wasn't any difference actually in the way that it's been detailed up and the design quality of the two parks. So it's actually, so we make one park. And I think it's always great working with engineers because they're very focused on their own subject area. So it's actually good being able to take all of that information, gather it together, and then decide on the best thing to do on the project, really, when you're faced with a certain situation. I think there is actually, and we've actually. I mean, I'm also a landscape architect, so obviously we have design roles. We have a pure design role on lots of other projects, but I think there is also a very good role particularly for large infrastructure projects like this, where you really need someone to coordinate with the engineering team to make sure that you can keep the design quality all the way through the process. I don't think particular training would be needed. I think it's just a case of making sure that the person in that role is able to work with lots of different other disciplines, and then are able to sort of consolidate the information that's provided by all those disciplines into the best solution, really. So but I actually think landscape architects are good at that. I think they're good at working with other professions, and they're good at being able to stand back and make decisions based on technical information. So I think we're an ideal profession for that sort of thing. Yeah. Well, I think it's a unique project in that landscape architects have led the landscape and public realm right from the master plan stage all the way through to implementation, and I think the results can be seen there. That, you know, the design quality in the end is exactly how, you know, we wanted, what we wanted to see as landscape architects, and I also think it's what people want to see as well. And I think just by the fantastic reaction I've had, people coming to me saying how fantastic the landscape is, and the best thing about the Olympic Park is the landscape. I've had all sorts of people coming and saying that, and I think it's simply because we landscape architects have managed to lead the whole thing, and we've managed to keep the design quality all the way through. I think lots of other projects do suffer because you get a disconnection at certain points, and the important things aren't taken through. I think the design quality is lost, and I think the good thing about a landscape architect leading it is you can make the judgments about the important things on the project, what actually makes the design quality, what are the best things to keep. If you're up against it in terms of budget, you can make the decision, the best decision to actually get the best results in the end. And I think that's actually what it's about, really. The biggest challenge leading in this interdisciplinary team, I think, is to make sure that you're getting the best out of them, and making sure that they're well informed, and that they each know what their role is, and they each know what contribution that they can make, and also being able to distill the information you get from the team, so making sure that you get the right advice to then feed into the process. Because, as I say, a lot of the design decisions and a lot of the decisions in the end on what materials we use and how things fitted together was a real collaboration. But using the engineering team as great sort of technical advisors really helped that whole process of collaboration, so we could bring into a meeting of other landscape architects. If we were meeting LDA Design and Hargreaves and Atkins and others, we could bring the best information into that process to get the best results for the scheme. I'll be honest and say that I think at the start, some of the engineers were a bit puzzled about a landscape architect leading them, because obviously they were used to being led by other engineers. But I think they soon realised where we were coming from, and I think in the end, I think we all worked really well together. And as I say, we've carried this onto other projects as well, this way of working, and I think it's been great from that point of view. I think engineers, some of them, I think that they didn't really understand landscape, and I think I've converted quite a few of them now, and I think they can see the importance of landscape, and a lot of them are sort of, have changed their views really, and I think that's one of the fantastic things about this project really, is that they've understood the park, and they've understood the results that have come out of this process. I think that's been extremely valuable for the profession as well, and for people's view of the profession, because I think here we have a landscape-led project, and with these fantastic results and fantastic design quality, I think that's just shows you what we can achieve as landscape architects, and really shows the profession off at its best really. I hope that people can see that, and I hope clients can see that, and I hope that they this may help on other projects to make sure that landscape architects are in more leading roles really. Well, I'm actually used to working in teams, some big multidisciplinary teams of engineers. So I think the perception's more the other way really. I think that in a way, I think the project has helped our engineers see the role of the landscape architect better and understand what we're trying to achieve on a project. So I actually think it's almost the other way around really. I think it's more that we've influenced, as a profession, I think we've influenced a lot of other professions in what we can do. And I think just by the media attention that the landscapes achieved on the park, and just the general comments when you're walking around the park and can hear people's comments, and you can see them photographing everything. I think it's a reflection on the product really, the end product. I think the biggest innovation was making sure that landscape architects led the whole process, frankly. I think that in itself was an innovation. But I think there are lots of innovations in the park. But I think the great thing about it is they've all been brought together. So you have things like the soil washing and balancing the cut and fill. There's also some fantastic sustainable use of materials. There's something like 107 buildings demolished, and 90% of that waste went into the bridge abutments, and made some very nice bridge abutments that you'll see around the park. The whole scheme is extremely good in terms of accessibility. It's DDA compliant. It's very accessible for all the park, which I think is another great feature of it. There's lots of other innovations which are hidden as well. Particularly on the sustainable side, there's materials added into the concrete, PFA waste material, which was added into the concrete as a sustainable way of reducing the amount of concrete that you use. We used sustainable timber products, and I think the other innovations were things like the ecology and the fantastic planting that you see, the meadows, and that whole way of planting, drought resistant planting, and thinking about climate change and thinking about how you actually you can actually carry out planting works on a scheme, which has been so fantastically successful. So I think there's a massive range of innovations, and I think this is a great project because it's brought all of those innovations together into one park, really, and shown it off. The biggest challenge was definitely the fact that the park was the largest project within the project as a whole. The biggest challenge was really working with all the other venues. So we're building a park, but there are also a lot of other projects going on at the same time. There were the venues. There were also something like 22 bridges being constructed, and we had to make sure that our park fitted with all of this other stuff that was going on. So it was the interface of our park with those projects that were the really challenging areas, because they would have their own ideas about levels, materials, lighting, fencing, so we had to make sure the park fitted perfectly with those. If you actually look at the park, you'll see that the materials are seamless all the way through. You don't suddenly jump when you go into the stadium, the materials don't suddenly change. So there's an awful lot of collaboration and coordination between our team, the sort of landscape engineering team, with all of those venues. That was the really, really big challenge. And I think one of the biggest challenges as well was the utilities. There's a mass of utilities going on underneath the ground, and we had to make sure that the park worked at surface so that we could get all the tree avenues in, so the ramps all worked in the right places, so there weren't manholes all over the place and feeder pillars and all sorts of stuff that comes to the surface. And these are all carefully lined up, and we made sure that materials all work between each of the projects. So it was a sort of huge coordination exercise, but that's a very interesting one as well. And it was great to work with all the other venues and understand what their objectives were, and to make sure that we matched materials and that the whole thing worked as a whole. Because the objective was always to create one park. It could easily have ended up as sort of 22, 23 different parks, but through careful coordination, I think we were able to achieve that. I think the biggest achievement has really been to show what the profession can achieve when it gets the opportunity, and when it gets the opportunity to not only plan a fantastic project from the start, but take it all the way through to implementation and get the results that we've all of us working on it have got, really. I think that's the biggest achievement. And I think it just shows you that if the profession's given the chance, it can achieve fantastic things that that are also extremely popular with the public as well. I think the public reaction to the park has been absolutely fantastic. I think that just shows you what can be achieved, really, and what the profession can achieve should it be given the chance. When the competition came up to look at the development of the South Park post-games, we put together a team with Make Architects and James Corner Field Operations. They're the New York landscape architects who did the High Line, which has got lots of media attention, quite rightly, in the past few years. And we put together a team with them, and we actually kept the same role that we have on the Olympic Games part of the park project as landscape engineers, because I wanted to keep that landscape engineering team together because we had such fantastic knowledge of the park, but bringing in some sort of new design ideas from James Corner and Field Operations. And we've now there's a new design that's been produced for the park, which sort of takes it onto the next stage, and should be fantastic, really. And that's really looking at the area between the stadium and the aquatics. So that's really looking at the way that whole area, which at the moment, of course, is designed for people movement in the park, to sort of redevelop that into a park, really for the future. So that's going to be a very exciting new development, really. I think on every project you always learn things. I think it's been a fantastic project for that, really. And I think it's just really learning how to... again, it's just adding to your experience of putting a project together, really. I think it's there's so many things that you learn. I think one of the things I've learned really is the value of exploring materials and looking at the way to get the best, sort of optimise the budgets, really, to get the best finishes that you can for the money. We did this through quite a lot of trialling of materials and samples, and looking at how materials work with each other and trying different finishes and that sort of thing. I think that was important part of the job. The other things I've learned are that to get the best results, you've just got to make sure the team really works hard, frankly, and that, you know, some things on projects, to get the best results, you've just got to have have long, boring meetings sometimes to sort of resolve things. I've also learned that you have to take the lead on things. You can't let things on these large projects, on large infrastructure projects. There's always some areas that never quite get resolved, and I think you've just got to think, I'm going to go and resolve that problem, and don't leave it for somebody else to do. I think you've got to take the lead and go off and resolve it yourself, and put the people together that can resolve it and get the thing moving. Especially on a project like this, which is has an immovable deadline. You just can't leave things. You can't afford to let things slip. You've got to be constantly anticipating what may happen. You've got to keep your eye on all these other projects that are going on at the same time, and say, how's that project going to impact on my project, and how can I make sure that the design quality on my project is going to be unaffected by what they're doing, and how can we collaborate together to make it work. So a lot of different things, I think, really. I'm hoping that this project will give lots of landscape architects, I hope it'll inspire them to remember that the landscape-led project can, we can get these great results from a landscape-led project. So I hope the project really acts as an inspiration on lots of fronts, really. Not only in the way it's being designed and the way that the materials have been used and the planting and all the ecology and the way that the whole thing's been integrated, but I hope it sort of acts as an inspiration from a career point of view as well, and I hope it gives them confidence, about the landscape profession in this country as well, because I think if you look at the quality of the park, that's what we can produce in this country as landscape architects, and I think we've all got to, really persuade clients, and we've got to persuade our fellow consultants that this is what we're capable of, and this is what we can have in this country. I also think that we were working to we were obviously working to an immovable deadline, but we were also working to a budget as well, and we couldn't splash out loads of money. And I think if you actually look at the materials, they're very simple materials, but they've been extremely well put together, been well thought out, well put together. And I think again that it's hopefully an inspiration that you don't always have to have fantastic materials. You can use materials in a way that will give you design quality, but just think about how they're put together. So I think the whole park, really, the whole project, on a lot of fronts, should act as a massive inspiration for the profession. I think the landscape role in the project was absolutely fundamental to the success of the whole thing. I think without that early landscape architect's vision of the park and how it could work from games through transformation and then on to legacy, without that sort of vision right at the start and that sort of idea about the whole thing, about the way that the whole park could work, I don't know what other profession would be able to do that, really. I don't think any other profession could. And I think it was essential that it was a landscape architects that led that whole thing, really. And then again, as I mentioned before, I think being able to maintain that vision through the master planning and then through the concept design, detailed design, all the way through to implementation, without a landscape architect at all those points, we really wouldn't have the fantastic park that you see today. And not only a park that you see today, because really the games is only part of a longer story, but you know, into the legacy, etc. as well. So the park is just part of a bigger story, really, and hopefully the park will act as a sort of catalyst for the whole of East London and the whole of that area. I think Boris Johnson said it was the most important development project in London, and I think that's some sign as to the importance of it in terms of the East End and hopefully the regeneration of the East End of London. And I think that the park's there as the central catalyst to all of that. That's the thing that's actually going to really bring in redevelopment and bring in sort of employment and bring in change into that area, really. And as I say, it's a central driver to that whole process. And you know, I think we landscape architects have known this for years, you know, but now it's good to see it actually being realised. And I do hope it all works. I think some of the garden festivals in the past that we've had, you know, they all really, I think you can only argue that they really failed in their objectives. But I think on this particular project, I think it's been extremely well thought through in terms of its planning, and let's hope that it's successful. I certainly think it's got an extremely good chance. When we'd finished the detailed design, we really pushed the client to make sure that we had a landscape architect on site as well. And that was extremely important. And we had the landscape architect was on site in the contractors' offices, working very closely with the client. So we had a very good three-way way of working and making sure that the design quality on site was carried through. So working very closely with the contractors and working very closely with the client on costs and budgeting, and being able to sort of manage design change, which inevitably occurs on these very large projects, to make sure that we still retain the design aims that were established right from the early master plan stage. So making sure that the design quality of the park was able to be brought through right through to the construction. So big key really was to have a landscape architect fully involved in all the construction and the way that was put together. I think with projects like this that go through quite a rapid development, I mean, it was, you know, we're talking about 6 years from some master plan to implementation, that there's an awful lot of information about why things were done in a certain way, and I think that's where BIM would have been really helpful, so that you could build into the whole sort of the BIM model information about the way that the whole park was developed and the reasons for doing things, and all information about how the park was finally put together. Because of the timing, this project wasn't carried out under using BIM, but I certainly think it would be now. If we were starting now, we'd certainly definitely use it for that. And I think it's going to become, you know, it's going to become the standard that we all use. I think all landscape architects and firms have got to embrace BIM, really. I think it's going to be vital to the whole thing. But I think what's great about it is it's just a way of being able to encapsulate the whole project and the way that it was put together at the time, because it's very easy once a project's finished to think you remember everything, but you definitely don't. You do tend to forget it the day you finish the project and start the next one. So I think it's definitely going to be a way of working for the future.